Hey friends, it's Jasmine, and I hope that you all are doing well. If you're new to my channel, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, it's good to see you back. As always, all of my links are down below. If you would like to follow me and what I'm up to on all different platforms, feel free to check it out. I'm on TikTok, I'm on YouTube, obviously, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Patreon. Check me out if you want to, don't if you don't want to. In today's video, I want to talk about witchcraft and I want to talk about sorcery. I will say my filming situation is a little bit different. I'm actually filming in my living room as opposed to my witchy room. However, my whole house is kind of a witchy room, really, but typically I film in my home office, which is like the witchy room TM, if you will. But I got this new couch and it's really comfortable, and I just felt like filming in my living room, really for no other reason other than that. I will say I am doing laundry, so you might hear my washing machine, which sounds like it's about to take off. And also I do have dogs, so they may or may not pop in, because sometimes when I talk to you guys or myself at my phone, they want to say hi too. You might have heard some of my dogs bark before, even when I'm filming in a different room, in the witchy room. Now, this kind of pertains to some stuff that I am currently working on. As many of you know, I am a second-year student of the RTA, the Red Thread Academy, which is like an online American traditional folkloric witchcraft academy. Absolutely amazing, 10 out of 10 recommend. I'm in my second year of 3, really enjoying it. I am also currently working on 2 manuscripts at the moment. Last year, August 4th, I published my first book. I self-published it through Amazon KDP. It's Ambrosia's Book of Witchflight. I'll like put it here somewhere. It's available on Amazon if you want to check it out, but basically that entire book is all about sort of hedgecraft and crossing the veil, traveling other worlds. It's not really a beginner's guide or a how-to book. It's really kind of more like a work of personal gnosis that kind of started off as UPG, but I think is now evolving into like SPG or shared personal gnosis, which is really fun. In the Witchflight book, there's like personal journal entries and bits and bobs about witchflight or astral travel, astral projection. But there's also what I call the Liber Spiritus, or the Book of Spirits, in that book. And I have decided to make an extended version of that. And when I had the rough copy of my manuscript ready, I didn't realize that Amazon KDP actually has a publishing like limit, where essentially you can only publish a book that's up to like 550 pages. And my book was a little over double that. So this book that I've been working on is actually going to be 2 books. It's going to be the Lesser Liber Spiritus, or Ambrosia's Book of Spirits, which will be the extended spirit codex from the Witchflight book with even more magical correspondences, and then also like personal gnosis added from myself and also other witches. I had a submission form open and I was lucky enough to be able to collect some really cool information from some other practitioners that I'll be including in the lesser. And then the greater, so the second half of the manuscript, which will be kind of its own book, is going to be Ambrosia's Book of Sorcery, or the Greater Liber Spiritus, which will be more a book about otherworldly sorcery specifically. So I kind of wanted to talk about witchcraft and sorcery because it was a topic within our Red Thread Academy and I really enjoyed it. I talked with some other witches here locally, be them in the Solar Court Coven and outside of the Coven, about what they thought about this. And because I'm currently working on manuscript that involves sorcery, I thought it would be fun to kind of talk about it here on the channel and also just kind of see what you guys think about it. So in the world of magic, I feel like there are these 2 sort of sectors, we can call them. You have your high magic or ceremonial magic, and you have low magic or folk magic. And I think that all forms of magic get kind of filtered through these lenses in a way, these 2 parties, if you will. Now, ceremonial magic is essentially like ritualized, structured magic, basically. The term high magic really comes from the connotation that it's working with the celestial or working with spirits or working with the above working with sort of even extraterrestrial or otherworldly forces. High magic doesn't necessarily imply that it's stronger or better than. It's more about what's above and what's outside, if you will. The way I kind of see folk magic is that it's more like magic of the people. It's a more accessible style of magic historically, because high magic or ceremonial magic has often been gatekept by the elite or even just by men. It was much, much more common for cunning women or folk healers of a lower caste to be practicing low magic. But it also gets its name low magic in the sense from it's very much like magic of the earth, magic of the elements, really working with stones, bones, herbs, oils. It's that good old down home sort of magic. One is not necessarily better than the other. I think that the terms high and low definitely give, I would say, a class connotation, which I think is a bit outdated now, because I think that practitioners from all different economic statuses are practicing both. And I think that a well-rounded witch, in my opinion, should be incorporating both in their practice, because there's a time and there's a place. You know, when it comes to my day-to-day witchcraft, a lot of it is folk magic. A lot of it is low magic. But when it comes to particular like astrological events, like Sabbats, Esbats, what have you, working with astrological sort of pinpoints, planetary hours, you know, equinoxes, like when the sun enters Libra for the fall equinox or Aries for the spring equinox, really planning sort of elaborate ceremonial rituals. I love that, but I love that for those occasions. I'm usually not going to do a full-on ceremonial ritual in my solitary practice and in my day-to-day. The way that I kind of see it is it's kind of like inviting people over for dinner. If you have just gotten off work and you're hungry, you might make something real quick, easy, dirty, you know? You might not necessarily dress your table or lay a bunch of like ornamental items out. You might not use your good plates. You might just microwave something. To me, that's folk magic. It still gets the job done. You still eat. You're no longer hungry. It gets the job done. Ceremonial magic or high magic is like maybe at holidays or special events that you get catered, or you spend all morning cooking and preparing and dressing a table and having a theme. That to me is more ceremonial. For me, that's not practical for every day. That's definitely something that's for a special occasion. But I do think that both are equally as important and powerful. In this video, we're specifically talking about witchcraft and sorcery. And are these the same thing? Are they not the same thing? Is it a little bit of both? From what I've gathered, it seems like people have a lot of different opinions about this. And like I said before, I would be interested to hear yours. So please feel free to share down below in the comment section. I'm gonna kind of break down the way that I see this and how I understand it. Starting with sorcery. Now this is like the textbook definition. This is the use of magic, especially black magic, which that comes from the Oxford Dictionary. That's literally how sorcery is defined. And then we have witchcraft, which this is also the Oxford Dictionary, like textbook explanation, to practice magic often with the intent to harm, magical spells. Okay, so this is gonna be my definition. This is how I sort of see these terms. When I think of sorcery, I very much think of spirit work. I think of working with spirits, and I think of something, I would say probably more ceremonial. And maybe that comes from some of my own background in ceremonial magic. But when I think of sorcery, I think of spirit work specifically. When I think of witchcraft, I think of magic more broadly. I think witchcraft can take on a ceremonial flavor, absolutely. And also, I think if you approach this from an animist perspective, I think you could argue that even with witchcraft, you are in a way working with spirits. We are pacting with otherworldly spirits. We are meeting the devil at the crossroads. We are making spirit familiars within witchcraft, right? But witchcraft doesn't necessarily, in every instance, have to involve otherworldly spirits. I mean, there are plenty of witches that work with purely nature and the elements, right? But then in that connotation, doesn't the river have a spirit, or the trees have a spirit, the winds have a spirit? So is that not still sorcery to a degree? Like, even if you are working from an animistic approach, that's still kind of sorcery. Well, then you also have styles of magic where the witch is pulling from purely their own energy and they're not calling out to other spirits. Is that witchcraft? I know that some people feel like that's not real witchcraft, and some people would argue that that's not a tea. I think that there can definitely be multiple avenues and aspects of like power and truth, and it's also okay if we see things differently. I think as a magical practitioner myself, coming from a tradition of magic, I think I see subtle nuances with these terms. I believe all sorcerers or sorceresses to be witches, as that does fall under the umbrella of witchcraft, but I do not think that all witches necessarily are participating in sorcery. So picture this. In the depths of a moonlight forest, a witch stands cloaked in darkness and adorned with ancient symbols. They possess a deep connection to nature and harness their own innate abilities to manipulate energy and cast spells. This is witchcraft. It's about tapping into one's own personal power and channeling it to create magic, generally speaking. Now let's shift our gaze to the realm of sorcery. Imagine a sorcerer surrounded by flickering candlelight, delving into the secrets of the arcane and studying that arcane. They seek assistance from spirits or entities, forming spiritual partnerships to generate magic. Sorcery, like a dance between the mortal and supernatural, where a sorceress could harness the power of these otherworldly beings to achieve their desired outcomes. Maybe that might be like making pacts, either by force or bribe or friendship with otherworldly spirits. I think it's important to point out too that I think Solomonic magic in general is oftentimes what a lot of people are thinking of, I think, when they're thinking of high magic, ceremonial magic. And Solomonic magic kind of incorporating working with holy names of God and commanding angels essentially to enslave demons to do your bidding. I think as witches in the modern world, I think we can definitely navigate this in a different way. Whereas witches, it's more about us working directly with lesser spirits or the infernal. And I really don't think that there's a problem with cutting the middleman out or cutting the angels out altogether. Now, I know that some of the high magic ceremonial magicians will definitely think otherwise and will swear by those old ways, but very few and far and in between have I ever felt like that was actually necessary to use that level of force. You know, you don't need to bring a pistol to every negotiation or every table that you sit at. I think it's good to keep that pistol on you, don't get me wrong, okay? But I don't think it's necessary for every conversation. I also do think that there's an ethical conversation that could come into play here, where if a spirit does or does not want to work with you, exerting violence over that spirit, I don't know if that's something that I necessarily agree with or subscribe to, unless I'm having to use my own will and my own force in order to protect me and mine. Now that's a different story, of course. And so I've written some notes here, and so kind of going back to that, both witchcraft and sorcery have their own unique allure and practices. Witchcraft often emphasizes the connection to nature, the elements, personal intuition, while sorcery, as I see it, places a greater emphasis on the interaction with spirits and entities. It's like two different paths that can, of course, like intersect at times, depending on the practitioner. So I don't think this has to be like a one or the other sort of path. I think that you can definitely practice both, but I don't know that I would say that everyone does. I definitely think that sorcery is a part of witchcraft. Like, I don't think there's any removing sorcery from the craft. But I wouldn't say that everyone who practices witchcraft is necessarily always also practicing sorcery. So like in my notes here, I wrote sorcery is witchcraft, but not every craft is considered an art of sorcery. I also wrote some notes here in regards to Solomonic magic. Solomonic magic is a type of ceremonial magic that is based on the practices attributed to King Solomon. If you're not familiar, fall down that rabbit hole. Very interesting. It involves rituals, invocations, and the use of symbols to connect with spiritual forces. It's been extremely influential within the world of magic, like especially like Western esotericism, hermeticism. Although I do think that it is falling more and more out of favor with modern witches as more witches begin to realize that those practices can be a little outdated and problematic. Commanding and compelling spirits is good knowledge to have, but not the best course of action for every spirit encounter. And every encounter, if you are holding a spirit to a metaphorical gunpoint, I would question if that level of sorcery is really healthy for you to be practicing if you're starting every conversation at gunpoint. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I wrote here in my notes. And some of this is actually sharing bits from my personal manuscript, talking about sorcery and witchcraft and where they intersect. So I guess I would say that I think that all sorcerers, sorceresses, okay, all spirit workers, spirit callers, are in a way practicing witchcraft and are witches. Like, there's not really removing that out of that. But I don't necessarily want to say, even as someone who's very much an animist, like I do think that every rock, tree, and creature has a life, has a spirit, has a name. I still don't necessarily think that every witch is practicing sorcery, because I do think that sorcery has more high magic connotations. It's more structured, it's more ritualistic than simple low magic is. Not that one is better than or less than, it's just kind of explaining these sort of terms. Also, I'm putting together sort of a dialogue about magical echelons, the way that we interpret where magic and power comes from. And I might make a video about this as well. And as someone who's a bit of a gamer, I love World of Warcraft, I've played since vanilla, I think it's easier sometimes for me to put things in like nerd terms. And when I think about like the classes, maybe in D&D or in World of Warcraft, you have priests and mages and warlocks. I think that some of that cosmology and some of that lore is actually very real, and we can pull inspiration into the real world from these video games. Honestly, where do you think the video games got some of their ideas from, right? Like the clergy, the priesthood, the priests, for example, they get their magic, they get their power through belief and devotion to the divine. Their magic works because they are devotees. It works through faith. So that would be also kind of like faith healing, I guess. And then you have mages, which kind of like study the arcane and weave and manipulate. They don't honor or worship, they're studying and manipulating energetic currents like elements, the arcane, be them terrestrial or extraterrestrial forces, and using that energy almost like someone would weave a tapestry. They're not honoring it like a priest would. And then you have warlocks, which I know that that's a whole can of worms to talk about in the witchcraft community. Some people feel really strongly about that term, that it's an insult. Some people want to reclaim it. Some people think that it's irrelevant. I would love to know what you think of the term. I don't necessarily feel either way about it, but that's just me. But warlocks, for example, through a World of Warcraft context, are enslaving spirits. Look at magic and sorcery through like a World of Warcraft lens, and we're looking at the warlocks in the game. They are commanding legions of demons to basically do the magic for them, which I feel like definitely pulls from like a Solomonic approach. In World of Warcraft, you also have like druids and shamans too, and I think that there is some intersection there between them. In the game, druids are kind of like natural shapeshifters that take on the form of different animals, communicate with animals, and bend nature and plants. And shamans venerate, honor, and worship the elements like storm, lava, snow, etc. And they're working magic and they're weaving with their power through their belief and devotion to the elements. So all of these things, while it might sound really maybe even cringe to some of you or nerdy, that's okay, okay? I think really pulls from real life inspiration, don't you think? So I would love to hear from you, like, how do you define witchcraft and sorcery? Do you think that these are inherently the same? Is there any removing one from the other? Like, can you just practice sorcery without practicing witchcraft? Can you just practice witchcraft without also practicing sorcery? According to the Oxford Dictionary, these are basically the same thing. But the more and more I talk to other witches, the more and more I feel like I'm getting different answers, which is always the case, because I feel like you can put 10 of us witches in the same room and somehow wind up with 20 different opinions, even though there's 10 witches in the room. Also, when it comes to like the echelons of power, what do you think of that? And where do you feel like you draw your power from? Do you identify more from like the shaman or priestess aspect where power comes through faith and devotion? Do you identify more with the warlock archetype where it's about commanding and enslaving lesser spirits or demons to do your bidding for you, not necessarily using your own energy? Do you identify with mages who study the arcane forces and manipulate them and weave these intricate magical tapestries? I mean, I think all of these echelons of magic are valid. I'm not necessarily saying that they aren't. I'm just curious to know where you feel like you fall, because I've been thinking a lot about that myself. Anyways, I think I've rambled enough in this video. I hope that you all have enjoyed it. And like I said, I hope that you all are doing well. I am so ready for spring to get here. I feel like I am de-thawing from winter and my seasonal depression. Yeah, and so I hope that you're doing well, friend. And yeah, I look forward to whatever conversations we have down below in the comment section. It's also currently the Witch's Black Lent right now. If you're participating in that, I just want you to know that I've really enjoyed watching all of your posts and all of your videos here on YouTube. I'm very much looking forward to our Feast of Fiends at the end of the Witch's Black Lent, where we watch everyone's content and share. So stay tuned for an update about when that live stream will be. It'll be at the end of Lent sometime. Anyways, friends, until next time, blessed be, and I will see you all in hell.